I became a Lutheran while I was in college. I was studying for a degree at a Reformed undergraduate institution. It was my plan to then go to a Reformed seminary, seek ordination in the PCA, and then pursue some kind of a PhD to maybe teach at some kind of Reformed seminary or college. And while I was in college, I became very interested in reading the Church Fathers. And, you know, my friends, who were all theology majors, we had like a group of guys that all lived together. We all studied theology. We stayed up all night debating stuff. It was a lot of fun. But when we were doing, you know, papers for classes, they were always drawn to like the Puritan authors. You know, and if you're familiar with any of the Puritans, they were reading like John Owen or a Jonathan Edwards. And for whatever reason, those guys just did not grip me at all. At all. And as a Reformed guy, I felt like they should, especially because I grew up where Jonathan Edwards preached in Western Massachusetts, the heart of the Great Awakening. I had history there, and I was supposed to be like kind of proud of my history. But every time I read Jonathan Edwards, I felt terrible. I just felt terrible about myself. If you ever read Edwards, I mean, if you know anything about Edwards, you've at least probably heard of the sinners in the hands of an angry God. You know, the image of the God holding you like a spider on its web, ready to like dangle off and fall into hell. And well, yeah, Jonathan Edwards' sermons were not all quite that terrifying. A lot of them kind of were. And reading a lot of Edwards, I didn't find a lot of joy and delight. I found a lot of kind of fear, and fear specifically about whether or not I was truly a Christian. So the short of it is that I was kind of looking for something else. I was looking for, and I was reformed in my convictions at the time, but I was looking for something I could really find some kind of joy and delight in. So I was often drawn to two things, and one was the Church Fathers, and the other was the writings of Martin Luther. Now, if any of you come from a Reformed background, you're probably familiar with the fact that Reformed people love Martin Luther just because of his book, The Bondage of the Will. And they pretty much don't read anything else. I mean, honestly, that was at least my experience was you read that book because according to them, this was the Calvinist version of Martin Luther. But as I began reading more Luther, I started to recognize that he didn't quite sound like the Reformed people that I was listening to preaching or being taught under. And I did find a kind of joy and delight and a Christianity that was not based so much on fear of whether or not I'm elect, a kind of stern moral rigor. But Luther seemed to like really love Jesus and enjoy life, and something I didn't have, you know. But along with that, I was reading the Church Fathers, and I found some very similar things in the Fathers as well, especially when they talked about the sacraments. I started to see Luther talks a lot about the sacraments. The Fathers talk a lot about the sacraments. They seem to get a lot of assurance there. They seem to get a lot of joy and delight and sustenance for the Christian life. But I'm not really seeing that myself. And after a period of studying and a lot of reading and probably being a very annoying student and grilling all of my professors with so many questions, came to the conclusion that I needed to be somewhere that was more historic, and somewhere that I could really delight in the gospel, and I found that within Lutheranism.